Welcome to the Grief Pod with Venetia Quick. This is a weekly podcast which looks at every aspect of something which has or will at some point affect us all. And that is grief. Whether you've lost a loved one or about to lose someone you know, or perhaps you're simply trying to help someone navigate their grief and don't know where to start or what to say, then perhaps this is the podcast for you. Each week I'll be bringing you different stories and experiences of loss, love, hope and at times humour. My guest on this week's episode is a member of Stocktons Wing, a keen chef, the author of A Beautiful Affair, and more recently became a Fellow for Equity in Brain Health at Trinity. We're going to ask you all about that in just a minute. Mike Hanrahan, thank you so much for coming in on this week's episode.
I'm delighted to be here, delighted.
We're going to start, I guess, with something that would seem to be becoming more and more prevalent. I was reading somewhere that the incidence of dementia are going to double every 20 years. Why is that, and how did you become involved in that area?
Well, the reason is very simple, because we're living longer, you know, and the average age is much higher than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So a lot of the dementia we hear about is kind of age-related dementia, and it's prevalent in Ireland. I've been a carer for age-related dementia, possibly now for maybe 13, 14 years, because my mum had an age-related dementia, and now my mother-in-law has it for the last four years. So I'm constantly in that environment, just visiting, and it constantly surrounds me, because my mum's death had a very traumatic effect on me. And when I look back, and I think it was a very positive effect, really, because it transformed my life. You know, I decided on the night she died that I was going to do some more work and learn more about dementia and how it affects families and how it affects communities, and see if I could, if I learn more, then I can give something back to society and maybe educate people a bit better and try and break down that stigma that surrounds dementia.
What is the stigma that surrounds dementia?
It's multifaceted, really. It's like, there's one of the most amazing things about dementia that we can't understand is that, I suppose you can in a way, when somebody has been diagnosed with dementia, more often than not, the community actually disappear. Instead of coming together. And like some people would say, well, it's a simple thing. A friend of mine lives with Lewy body dementia, and he just says it's basically, they don't know what to say to me. They don't know how to approach it. And the only way we can break that down is by talking about it and getting people to understand that dementia isn't a life sentence. It certainly isn't a death sentence. It's basically people, the different types of dementia, so many, hundreds of different types of dementias. But how it affects people, it affects different ways, because different parts of the brain, we're a very complex brain. And people genuinely live quite comfortably with their dementias, you know, and it's treatable, it's not curable. And from my point of view, my interest is in purely from the creative arts aspect of what we can do. I had written a song for my mum in the last year of her life called A River Rolls On.
Yeah, it's a lovely song.
Yeah, I was very proud of it.
Yeah.
And I gave it to the Forget Me Nots choir, who are a dementia-friendly choir, an amazing organisation, amazing bunch of people. And we recorded it during COVID. They were at home and onto their phones and onto their laptops doing their vocals, and we managed to get into the studio and record it. And then we created a beautiful video on Dollymount Strand. And that was released, oddly enough, the day my mum died.
By pure coincidence.
Pure coincidence. It was mad. Now, I sometimes wonder was it a coincidence, because I believe in all that other stuff. I believe in that magical energy. And I guess when she died, I kind of had a sense in my within me saying that I need to go and do something now. And that's when I applied to Trinity College for a fellowship.
And your mum, before she died, you were just saying you recorded all this during COVID. She was in a care home. You had to visit her. Was it a window visit?
Yeah.
For the last few weeks of her life?
It was the window visit that wrote the song for me, actually. It was the frustration of the window visit. Because, dementia is called a long goodbye, and it's called a long goodbye because that's exactly what it is. My mum lived with it for 8 years. And I guess I was going down to Clare and visiting. I'd spend weekends down there, or else drive down some days and drive back up. And then on one occasion, the window visit was so frustrating because it was windy and rainy, and so you couldn't see much through the window, and then you couldn't hear anything. And I felt for all three of us. There was the nurse, my mum, and me. I felt for all of us. And I had this wish then that my mother's journey would end. So I actually wrote the song wishing her the best which it troubled me when I was writing it, because you're basically, and it's this guilt thing that happens when you're caring for dementia.
But is that something with dementia that is for both the person and the loved ones, I suppose, especially, is you're starting to grieve for them before they've even gone?
Absolutely, without a doubt. The grief, it's multi-layered, it's nuanced. There's so much grief around dementia in different aspects of it. There's grief for the person who's diagnosed, because when it's younger onset dementia, like most of those people who suffer from younger onset dementia are still working. They still have a life, and they have no pension yet. They're under the age of that. They might have a young family. There's that grief of losing your sense of respect in your work and having to deal with it. Then there's the family, the carers, and then there's the community, because the community feels like they're losing a member of their own set. It might be able to play golf anymore, might be able to do the gym much more. And so there's all that. And then there's the personal grief, because when you're in there, the communications, if it's an age related and it's over long term, you can see the decline of the person that would have nurtured you and looked after you and nursed you and
then there comes a point perhaps where they don't know you.
Yep, there is.
And that must be it's heartbreaking.
Absolutely heartbreaking.
What you're just saying there about the community, and one of the biggest problems is that people tend to walk away or don't know what to say, and this comes up a lot, with people when people die, because people sort of go, I don't know what to say, and I'll say the wrong thing, so I'll say nothing. What should the community be doing? What should people's friends be doing if their friend can't go out and play golf anymore? They can't go for a pint.
Just call,
Yeah, call in.
Just call. There's it's quite amazing when you separate the community from the new community in the nursing home. In your regular community, people are afraid to approach dementia, whereas in the care home, you find a new family, because we're all in there together.
Yeah,
it's like a nod of approval going down the corridor, or if somebody does something inappropriate, it's grand.
Yeah,
And the other aspect of that grief, which really struck me, and it caused me to think, and I'm writing a short story about it, is when my mum was leaving the nursing home in the hearse, and we drove out the gates of the mortuary, and I looked back, and the gates of the mortuary closed, and it really struck me that was the end of a life, of an existence for people. And I go up and down every few weeks, but there are spouses and family members who go in and out every day into this community, and suddenly when their loved one dies and passes on, that life is cut off.
Yeah.
So that's another grief. I mean,
it's their day to day. What becomes their day to day?
Their lives are there, and like they're rushing from job to be back over. And that's what happens. That's the reality of that existence, and there's no support mechanism for that either. So the more we talk about these things, I think the more we might open up our minds to, like if the life is over and the family are basically shut out when the gate closes, which is what happens. It's not deliberate. There's no support. We should maybe consider that aspect of it, because for some, I've seen wives where they'll end up having a relationship with the cook, or the matron, and they're talking to each other about hurling, football, cooking. They develop this amazing friendship, and then it's gone.
But I think also as well is because they know that person understands what their person is going through or what's going on. So there's that connection.
Yes, there is an absolute connection. But the problem, the way I say it is, it's like waves on the shore. The wave will come in, and then when you leave, you're left. You leave. You recede back into the ocean, and all that's left is shingle.
Yeah.
And that's how I kind of sense that. For these families who are in existence, all that's left of their lives now is shingle. They got to pick up the pieces and move on, and that's tough. That's another aspect of grief, and I think that's what I want to do now is try and pick out what I've learned in my life since my mum moved on, and what I've learned in college, and what I've learned from so many great people involved in dementia space, to try and use my ability as a writer and an artist to promote like a better understanding, really. And
was this something that, because I know you said that when your mum died and you wrote the song, that just the song changed your life. So it changed your life in how you thought about life, or what you were going to do with your life, what you felt your life's purpose was.
On so many levels, but I sometimes say I actually finally discovered what I wanted to be when I grow up. I think there was
because you've been a lot of things.
Yeah, there was an element of that where I don't mind taking on new challenges in my life, and you know that I just take it on. And this was much more than a challenge. It was something that I felt I really had to do, and I had to understand more. And when I went into Trinity College, it's a global movement. So there was 13 of us in a room, and there was 18 in a sister room in San Francisco. And I was sitting beside neurologists, neuroscientists, clinical psychologists, a film director, a dancer from Brazil. They were from all over the world. And I immediately felt that imposter syndrome when I was in there. But that was knocked out of me after a few weeks.
So that came about you just went out and researched, where can I do something?
Yeah.
I can educate myself in this.
Yeah, and I spoke to people, and one of the founders of the Forget Me Not Choir, Karen Meenan, said, I did this fellowship a few years ago. She said, you should really consider it. So I applied and did the interviews, and I got it, and I met a whole new community. Like, I've met incredible people, and to discover what goes on in the creative arts, in dementia care, in well-being, it's powerful, down to a simple thing like a tuning fork in the key of C. It helps you. It alleviates your stress. I mean, I never knew all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I never knew the association with the key of C and G, that they're in touch with your energies. And it's not fandango stuff. It's proven now scientifically.
Yeah.
And there's a new study out now, I was just reading it during the week, where they really believe that music and sound, rhythm, has an inherent effect in your brain, because we're connected, like in a neuroaesthetic kind of environment where it affects our brains in that way. So when I read all these reports, it makes me, you got to keep going here.
Yeah.
Keep finding out more. I love learning, because there's a lot going on.
Yeah, and just with the creative arts and dementia, like, do you think there'll be a point where it will play as important a role as, say, medication?
I believe that's at the moment.
Already,
I've reached that
conclusion.
part.
Yeah.
And what was really, I was when I was in Trinity, I was one day my imposter hat on, and I said, "I'm sorry, I don't have the cure,"
Yeah.
And I was talking to everybody. We don't have the cure. We just got the music. And a neurologist from Chile who was in my class, she just turned to me and said, Mike, we don't have the cure.
Yeah.
You know, and it was like, that was, the bell went off. And I think there has to come a point where the creative arts has to become as important as a tablet until we find a cure. They can't work separately. They got to work together. So we have to change our approach to how we get the person living with dementia to have a better experience with the creative arts in their community. And it's happening. I mean, Emma, the Museum for Modern Art, they are so far out there ahead of the posse, developing ways to bring the arts to the people, the dementia community. Because that whole movement of neuroaesthetics, the power of aesthetics on your brain is growing, and it's growing very fast. And it's not arty-farty musicians and hippies like me. It's the scientific community are driving this.
And is that, like, how much of that is being bought into, say, care homes now, or is that still way off? Or is it something that has to start earlier on in the diagnosis?
In some care homes, they're moving on it. Not enough. There's an amazing care home out in Shankill, St. Joseph's, and they're just... You'd want to live there yourself, you know. Because as soon as you walk in, you get that energy, positive energy, and there's colour everywhere. There's life. There's agency. It's about giving the person proper agency in their lives. If they're brought in to live in a care home, they have every right as anybody else. And we talk a lot about the human right of existence in our world. That in dementia care, we need to push the human right of a person living with dementia has equal rights with everybody. And it's, if they, like, I got down to a simple thing, like, where if somebody's playing music in a care home and they're singing Frank Sinatra and they go through all the Frank Sinatra songs, I always ask the question, there might be somebody in there
who had it at their wedding. Like,
no, actually, worse than that, madder. There might be some there who'd like to hear AC/DC.
Well, this is true. This is true.
And that's where I think we have to develop a more one-on-one and understanding on, like things like poetry is very important for your brain. We remember so much in our brains, and words are very important in dance. So I do hope that will develop. It's slowly developing. But I think they should just do a full documentary on St. Joseph's and put it up there.
This is how it's done.
How to do it.
I wonder, though, is there a bit of, you know, when you hear somebody, like, I think somebody the other day was telling me that somebody they knew had dementia that was moving along, shall we say, and it was sort of like, oh, you know, it wasn't meant in a mean-spirited way, but it's sort of like, you know, that's sort of the fait accompli and they won't remember anything. And do you think we don't know enough, like we don't try hard enough with people with dementia? Do you think there's an attitude with people that, oh, well, should they forget? They won't know who I am. Do you know that way?
I do, yeah. And that's not true, like, because not every dementia
it's
affects,
the same.
You know, I mean, Alzheimer's would affect your memory in that sense, but there's a lot of other dementias. Lewy body, which is really growing and growing, that has a completely different way of affecting the brain, and it's kind of tough and cruel. But the people I know living with Lewy body have, I mean, one of them, Kevin Quaid, is the vice chair of Alzheimer's Europe. You know, he's spent all week this week in Brussels.
Wow.
He's been living with Lewy body for quite a few years, but he's positive. He's written 2 books. I loved the first book he wrote was My Name is Kevin, Not Louis. and you know, and I think when we have more of that positive energy going around,
and it's more open, maybe
much more open,
understanding of.
I think
the different.
I think people will, and it's definitely getting better, and the better it gets, the easier it will be for people to live. Because, like your podcast about grief, that grief that for the long term, long goodbye, would be much easier for people, you know, if they knew that the community were cool and they can call in and most of all is to realise that it's not. Your friend hasn't been given a death sentence. It's
they're still there.
Yeah, I always think like just a bit of wiring has gone in the brain. It's just the different versions of people, and you learn how to, and there are tough times. There are really sad times, and I guess one of the things we want to kind of promote as well is to kind of understand the burden of care, because that in itself is grief. The carer, the family who's looking after it, there's a burden there. That's something we hate to talk about. We regard, oh no, we can't talk about that in case it affects people. No.
I know, no, it should be. Because, I mean, if you think about it, it's such as we were saying, you're losing the person sometimes, in some cases, in front of your eyes. So you've that sort of, it's like a living grief.
Yeah.
And then, your life is completely dedicated to this person, which you want to do, but there must be times where you just go, I can't do this.
Yeah. And what's wrong with that?
Yeah. And
that's the question, and the more we talk about that, the easier it'll be for people to kind of understand, geez, this is so, because it's a real emotion, but we're kind of we're wired up to think, well, we shouldn't be thinking those things, we should be feeling guilty if we think that. And I know I've felt that guilt, but I know so many people do, but we shouldn't have to feel that guilt. And we need to protect the carers. And I don't believe we protect them at all. I think, we say, wasn't she great or wasn't he great? But God, there's so many levels going on here. And the fact that it drives me mad when people say to me, you can't use the word burden. And I say, why? Yeah. So I remember being asked one time I said it at one time in Trinity at some meeting about the burden of care, and someone said, "Oh, you can't use that word, Mike. It's not good." And then I looked up the Alzheimer's guide, and it was one of the things was don't use the word burden at the time. So I went into my phone and I went into Thesaurus. And I put in burden, and I got about 20 words. It says, well, which word do you want? Which will suit you?
Yeah, because but I mean, I think that's, people have to, it's the same, perhaps if you care for a child that has, difficulties.
Absolutely.
Or whatever it may be, there are times where you just want to step away from it.
Yeah, and what's wrong with that?
And there's nothing wrong with that.
It's a human emotion, And you shouldn't be made feel that
guilty.
Guilt,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your mum, there was 8 of you.
Yeah.
Did she encourage the whole music thing, or was it at a time where she sort of thought you should have a proper job?
No, she encouraged herself and my dad were great. They just encouraged us to play. And I'm of a generation where we didn't go to college. We left school and we got a grand pensionable secure job, and I did that. And then when I decided I wanted to go on the road, I always remember Mum was kind of giving out to me, and she said it to Dad then, and Dad just said, well, sure, once he has the guitar over his shoulder, he won't go hungry, Mary.
Yeah.
So I think they would have always encouraged us to do things. I was always sad that my dad never saw me in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Because I spent 10 amazing years in the kitchen. And but I often used to think that if my mum had said to Dad that, geez, he's going to be a chef now, he probably would have said, I'm sure once he has a frying pan, he won't go hungry. And that was the attitude.
Yeah.
It was like, they taught us to just go out there and create our own river, go down there and make the best of it and just be good about it. Like that's,
And has that driven you as well? Because obviously you did cook for a good many years, and it's something you love to do. You still love to do it, because even during COVID you did all your Instagram.
Yeah.
But do you feel like when you cook, because I think sort of cooking is very therapeutic as well, and it's something that, it's a de-stress thing, but is that something that you feel is an outlet for you?
There's no doubt I use cooking as a therapy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Oddly enough, I don't think I've shed a tear for my mum. But I often, because she was a great cook. So many times when I'm cooking at home, because the kitchen's mine, everybody get out of here. And it's just me. I don't have no radio. It's just me and my thoughts and the food. And I think of Mum so many times when I'm cooking, when I'm baking. I hear her words, and to me that's the connection, you know.
Yeah.
And
we're saying, no, you should be doing it this way.
Yeah. No better woman. And so I do think cooking is therapy, and it's kind of important in the dementia space as well, because people who have always loved to cook at home, they're now developing this thing of encouraging them. Like, and there's a friend of mine who he likes to cook. He won't remember what he wanted to cook this morning, so they get up in the morning and they set the table and the utensils, and they cook in the morning. They're saying, well, we're going to have stew this evening. They'll have it already. They're the little things that make such a huge difference, and they're just navigating their way through it. Yeah, but he's still cooking, you know. So
that's, you know, that's keeping the brain going.
It is, yeah.
And did you find after you lost your mum, because the cooking connection, there were things you couldn't cook, or things you just, for maybe a while, you couldn't touch because it reminded you of her too much?
It was actually the opposite. I started making her bread.
Oh, really? Was it better?
No, I've never perfected. I actually went through a stage. I have to perfect the bread, and my wife Donna just said, "What's it? No more bread, please." But it was, yeah. But I remember her all the time, because I loved cooking even when I was a young guy, and I became a vegetarian at an early stage, and so I'd had all these ideas, and Mum was always interested to know. You know, I'd come back and I'd say about this thing and that, you know, a bit of garam masala. What's that? And suddenly you come back you come down in a few weeks, and there's the garam masala and something, you know, and something. So with that great connection, so I do think that the kitchen is where I kind of keep the connection with her. Yeah. And the garden is where I keep the connection with my dad. Wow. I mean, I'm a terrible gardener, but every time I'm in the garden, he's there with me, you know. Wow. And that's how I deal with my loss, because loss is
huge.
Massive, yeah.
And down through the line as well. I mean, with your music, you've worked with a huge amount of people who have lost their lives. Yeah. Like the likes of Ronnie Drew and Shay Healy. And how do you deal with that loss through your music, through playing? Or
Ronnie we were very close friends. His death really shook me. Even though we knew it was coming, you know, for a couple of years, but it just, when it was final, it was really tough. And the same with Shay. And Paul Ashford we were so close. Paul, he was a bass player with Step Aside. And I got to do the eulogy at his funeral, and Pat Fitzpatrick, and piano player, I had the eulogy for his, and in a way there were my ways of connecting into them. And it was nice that I was asked by the family to do that, because we had that connection. But I missed them all the time, and and I keep Ronnie alive, because at the gigs I always talk about Ronnie. Yeah,
and do you play something specifically for him?
Yeah.
Or what?
I have a song that we wrote called "We Had It All."
Oh, I know it. Right.
And I do that for Ronnie every night, and I'll tell stories about Ronnie. And the book was a great. It was so good for me, because I was able to talk about my friends and tell little anecdotes, and that was the way. And grief has different ways of, you know, you get it out there somehow, and when you're living with a story, like Ronnie's a full chapter, so I was living with him for months. You know,
he was your flatmate.
Yeah. You know, and so when you're living with somebody, I mean, I did a chapter for your lovely Martin, who I loved, but it brought me back into that lovely space.
Yeah, and actually I was rereading the book over the weekend, and I was reading parts of it. Yeah. And it sort of brings you back right to that place. You sort of forget momentarily that anything else has happened or going on. You're just, the way it's written and present it with the recipes and everything. You're just there in that moment.
Great. I'm delighted.
Because
I was when I was writing it. And it gave me... So, and the thing is, when you're writing those, you don't write in 5 minutes. Like it's with you, and you're researching, and you're looking back at old photographs, and suddenly... And I think that's therapeutic. Well, for me it was.
Yeah.
The entire process, even with my mum, my dad. My mum hadn't died when I wrote the book. My dad had been gone quite a few years. And also I was able to go back in my life and my youth and use my writing to kind of... So I think all those are good. I don't think I did it deliberately to kind of look after the grief I've felt in life, because it took me 6 years to do my dad's death. And even though I'd written a full album after he died, and 6 years later I ended up in therapy because my head was so screwed up. And that was back in 2006. And I went in for therapy to kind of sort myself out. But Dad was right at the centre. So what was at the centre of my life at that time was I'd never grieved for Dad at all. So, and suddenly he was everywhere. I did this beautiful arts therapy where you draw your emotions out and create them. And everything I did it was related to Dad. It was quite amazing. And that's when I realised just how important he was in my life. Yeah. Because sometimes you don't connect that much with them, you know.
Well, I think it's sometimes when there's a lot more going on, you could sort of compartmentalize and you put it somewhere, and then something will happen and it comes out.
Yeah, and I left home when I was 19. So was coming back was my connection with him. But I think, you suddenly realise, oh my God, they are such a part of your lives. And I think, to me, I celebrate their lives. And I think that's how I've always dealt with grief. I celebrate the life, the joy that we had, and what we'd given each other for the time we had. And I think that goes for everybody, all my friends who've moved on. I do my best to celebrate them. And remember good times like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Final thing, if there's a song that encapsulates the friends you've lost, your parents, do you have one song? Is it like one that just sums everybody up?
From somebody, some others, any song?
Yeah.
I would that's a tough question because I love songs. My immediate, I suppose, reaction is a song that Leonard Cohen wrote called Alexandra Leaving, which is suddenly the night has unfolded, the gods of love preparing to depart. I think that's, I would maybe say Alexandra Leaving would be quite a stunning song.
Mike, thank you for coming in today.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Grief Pod with Venetia Quick. You can listen on SoundCloud or wherever you get your podcasts. We also have an online community on Facebook, The Grief Pod, or on Instagram @GriefPod Series.